What is the essential part that we need to do before we begin to get ready for teaching?
Pray.
Yes, pray. Thank you. What is the next thing that we need to consider?
Goals and objectives.
Audience. We have to consider our audience, and we need to do our research to that audience. And once we know our audience, and we're praying and asking God, then we look for something. Topic. And then what do we do with the topic? And this can be kind of fluid. Research. Anything else?
Set your goals.
Set your goals. Anything else? Something we were doing here. Mind map. It's basically getting it organized. All right? And we're actually in the middle of looking at actually beginning to write that down now. We talked about the first part. What was that? What was the first thing that we do? We do an outline. We actually, it's probably not in order of how I would actually do a writing out my teaching, because I'm doing the main goals and the body of it first. And then we start with the beginning, which is the opening. Yeah. So that's where we are today. We structure our lecture, opening, creating a need, overview, introducing. So the second part is overview. B is overview. Introduce your material. So I did that too. When I said yesterday, I said after we did all the questions, I said today we're going to look at the basics of teaching, and then the rest of the week we're looking at effective teaching. We're looking at, and I kind of listed all the things, learning styles and so on. That's what I was trying to do. It's like the newscast. They tell you what they're going to tell you, then they tell you, and then they tell you what they told you. So we do that too in teaching. So, and the reason why is because for us to remember and retain information, we have to have it repeated. How many times have you heard God tell you He loves you? Yes, why? Because we forget. We forget. So we need to hear it all the time. So it's the same thing. For us to remember things, we need to have it over and over again. And the more things that we study and go over and over and over again, the more we know those things. And we can communicate them. So, thoughts?
It's excellent.
Okay. All right.
I'm so random in my teaching. And it's
That's
so
okay,
good.
but
It's so good to be so structured.
yeah.
It makes me happy.
I mean, I'm telling you kind of the bare bones, the skeleton, so that's actually something good to bring up. I'm giving you the bare bones, the structure, because that's like the building blocks of it, but then your style comes in, and the way that you are comes in, and that's good. That's okay. If it looks a little slightly different, it's okay. I think that's who we are, and that's how God made us. So this is not, I don't want to put on you something that is like, oh, I have to fit into this box. This is the basic structure of what teaching looks like, and then you can play around with it. And you'll see actually in the next part that we do, that we can play around with that. And that's number C, letter C, the body. So, you're determining the main points, which is why we do this whole mind mapping thing, because I think that helps bring up the main points. And it helps us look at it, analyze it in light of our audience. How am I going to structure this? So our audience actually determines what the main points are and how we're going to structure it. Okay? So things that you need to consider, you need to phrase them concisely. If you are not sure if they're concise and clear, bounce that off somebody. Bounce it off your wife. Bounce it off your friend. Bounce it off your roommate. Bounce it off your ministry leader. Whoever you trust that you can have that honest feedback, because you want honest feedback. And so you phrase it concisely. You limit the number of main points between 2 to 5. Did Phil say anything about that with preaching?
He didn't give a max. He talked about giving an hour outline.
Yeah.
He did say 3, yeah.
Yeah.
He did say
I mean,
4.
it's probably like the general idea in preaching is 3.
Yeah.
It can be more, but if you get too much, it gets too many. And in fact, it says here, the more main points you have, the less value each of them have. And so that kind of can take away. Right. I was kind of laughing because I have so many points on this, but it's such a different teaching, and I'm trying to get you to get through and understanding the structure and bones of what a teaching is about. So, all right, and then order them effectively, logically, moving to a climax. So you don't want to give them this amazing point and then kind of go, oh, and by the way, there's this point and this point too, and it's like a story. It has to build on each other. There's also something we're going to talk about probably a little bit next week too, where it's on time learning. It's you don't give subtraction problems to somebody when they haven't learned addition. Okay? That kind of thing. You don't give division problems to someone who doesn't understand multiplication. So you have to build on things so that it makes logical sense. And if you're having a problem trying to figure out if that's logical or that makes sense, again, bounce that off people. So, yes. So the following are various ways you can structure your main points of your lecture. So, topical. So some people are more topical thinking, and maybe your audience is a more topical, like they would get it better in a topical, which means there's parts to a whole. So you're bringing in all these different parts to a whole. We can see that in preaching too. I was thinking, the topical of injustice we had actually at church on Sunday. And so then he was pulling out scriptures in different parts and bringing into that topic. So very important that you know scripture in context so you're not pulling it out of context. But you can do that. Look at the grace of God. Well, Paul talks about the grace of God in several places, right? Romans, Galatians, so Ephesians, it's through there. So you wouldn't be reading through the passage. You would read that passage and another passage, but you'd have to maybe make sure that you are bringing the appropriate historical background for those different parts. So, okay, topical or chronological. So you develop a timeline, especially dealing with history. So how it moved through time. Spatial. So this is like a map idea. You actually use ideas visually or literally with a visual aid. So when I did Isaiah, I just remember thinking, I was praying, I think before I was getting this lecture together, and I was, look, who's Isaiah and where are the people at this time and what's going on and so there's judgment here, and there's sin. What's the sin? What's the judgment? The restoration. When's the restoration? Because some of the restoration is for the Israelites then coming back from exile, and some are for coming, when Jesus comes, and then even beyond that. So there's like all kinds of restoration. So I was thinking, oh man, this is so hard. And I was doing the mind map, and I had all that stuff. And I'm like, this is like a mountain of a book, and we're not even going to be able to get to all the teeny little details. It's so frustrating, right? So I thought, it's like a mountain. So I painted a mountain. I'm an art background, so I painted a watercolor mountain, and I had ridges coming down, and I said, so when I started the whole lecture, I put it on the wall, and I said, this is a picture of what Isaiah is like. It's a mountain. It feels like a mountain, And we're going to look at the ridges and see, these are some of the ridges that we're looking at. And then I've named all those different parts that I was naming, plus some others. But anyway, so, and I used that kind of as my outline as I was doing it. So that's kind of something that can happen. Or you can have a map or whatever. Something, it's a little different. It's a little different way, but it's still logical. I still built on each other, so. Journalistic questions is very popular. We've done it many, many times in our teachings. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. So, and people often think that way, so it's very popular. It's a great way to do it. Problem to solution. So bringing in the problem, and actually this is what was the pastor on Sunday did. He brought in the problem of what was going on within the counties here with children at risk. And the statistics, it was terrible. It was very sad. And then he was like, but we can do something about this. And he started bringing options of solutions. So that was his way of doing it. So one thing you're going to notice that you're going to be completely spoiled for the rest of your life about analyzing preachings and teachings. So just be ready. All right, method of residues. So you're eliminating alternates. So it's kind of similar to problem to solution, where you've got this problem, but then you've got, so this is one way you could do it, this is another way you can do it, this is another way, and then you kind of whittle down the ways that maybe this isn't probably the best way, pros and cons, da-da-da. So it's kind of a more confusing, I would say. It's not confusing, but it's just a little different way of doing it. And then there's the motivational, which this was developed by this guy, Alan Monroe, on the basis of psychological dynamics of advertising. And advertising is probably the most influential way of motivating people, and so we do need to notice it, even though sometimes it's not used for good. So 5 steps of the motivational is gaining the audience's attention, which we've already talked about. That's creating a need, or focusing on the need that they perceive they have. Okay, so it might not be reality, right? I'm just thinking of like the car, and they have the beautiful person with the car, and it looks like, it just makes you feel like, I don't have that, and so I'm not going to be as happy and successful if I don't have that car. So focusing on the unmet need of the audience or desirable motivational appeal, so that's what I'm talking about, and then proposing a solution that satisfies the need. So if I have that car, then I will feel that way, which is the big lie. But and visualizing how the solution would work to meet the need, so how you can do that. And then calling for an action to put the solution into effect. Now, we can turn those things from advertising that isn't so great into what is true in truth, and that would be great.
Want to see a good example of that?
Yes.
Go to our Orlando website and look at any of our school descriptions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Brand them with like marketing books and things like that.
Oh, you
Basically
do?
this right here.
There's a need.
That's awesome.
You need to fill it. We're not the solution. We're the guide to the solution.
Sweet.
All of that.
Awesome. So you guys already have it in your DNA. That's great. That's awesome. So these are many types. I'm going to say that this is not an exhaustive list. All right. This is basically to kind of give you a bunch of stuff and say, here's some possibilities. Consider these, but maybe there's something else that God's going to give you. And God is outside of the box, and he can do it. He's very creative. And so that's why I'm like, pray, because he really knows the best for your audience and what needs to happen. So any questions? Any examples of this that you've used?